the divine feminine will never, ever disparage the divine masculine. Everything Mary Magdalene is about is Jesus Christ. She is all about him. And as we look a little deeper, hopefully, you will see he's always pointing back to her as well. And so it's this beautiful interdependence, it's this beautiful commitment to raising all the children of God, both male and female.
Welcome to another transformative episode of That's Church. Today, we have the honor of talking with the remarkable Mandy Green, all about her expertise on Mary Magdalene. Mandy introduces herself beautifully in this conversation, but we can't help but sharing how healing, touching, and spiritually uplifting it was to speak with her. Her insights on Mary Magdalene will leave you feeling empowered, especially as women. This conversation was so impactful for us, and we know it will resonate deeply with you too. Before we dive in, we're so excited to share some great news. We are hosting a special event at the new Faith Matters Compass Gallery in Provo, Utah. It will be a That's Church experience. It's coming up on November 2nd. This intimate gathering will celebrate diverse faith traditions with amazing speakers like Patrick Mason, an LDS scholar, Pastor Brittany Mangelson from the Community of Christ Church, formerly known as the RLDS or Reorganized Church, Mesa Kurgay, an incredible Muslim woman, and an interfaith couple, Ankar Hajmani, a Hindu, and Bryn Lewis, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After their presentations, we'll hold a panel discussion, giving attendees the opportunity to ask questions and engage in meaningful dialogue about cultivating interfaith relationships. Space is limited, so save the date, November 2nd, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m., and start thinking of questions. It really will be a unique opportunity to feel free to ask questions you've always wanted to ask people of different belief systems and perspectives. Registration and more details will be available soon. Be sure to follow us on our Instagram at That's Church Podcast and listen to future episodes for updates. You don't want to miss this incredible opportunity. And don't forget, we also have locked episodes available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts only. This includes part 2 of this amazing episode with Mandy Green, which she dives even deeper into her insights. You can listen to these bonus episodes for only $2.99 a month or $24.99 for a full year. This really is a great way to support the show and access exclusive content. Now let's get into this beautiful conversation with Mandy Green. Okay, so Mandy Green, we are so excited to have you on. Tell us about you.
All right. So I studied humanities in college. I love the arts, but I think I've just found out I have ADD, shocker, but it's explained my whole life. And I'm actually being really productive now, but it's really hard for me to focus on one thing. And so I love things that branch off into other things. And really, in short, I sent my youngest off to, I believe it was second grade, came out of what I call my childbearing coma, when you're just in Teletubbies and Cheerios.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what it is. It's a beautiful stage, but cognitive thought is not, necessarily a daily aspect of that. And I said a kneeling prayer, which is unusual at the time. And I just said, I have ability and talent. Where do you want me? And I had a friend who had been telling me for a long time, you've got to come take this Old Testament class with me. And I was like, Old Testament? Who studies that? I mean, yuck. But gratefully, she persisted. And within just minutes of being in that class, it's just like someone lit a match to my soul. It just lit me up. And it was a weekly class with Rebecca Stay. It was somewhere in Linden, Utah. And within a few weeks of that, I was driving away from the class and I had this very strong prompting. I've only had maybe 2 or 3 in my life like this that said, you need to learn biblical Hebrew. No, I had no idea biblical Hebrew was a language. I'll be honest. And it persisted for a long time. And I'll admit I tempted God, and I was like, I am not derailing my life for biblical Hebrew. I really wanted to study pre-Raphaelite art, the Lady of Shalott, if you've ever seen that painting. It's my favorite painting. And all week I tempted God. I was like, okay, I need a sign. Like, I need a sign. I'm not going to just do this. And I walked into class, and literally the first words out of that teacher's mouth were, for those of you wanting to learn biblical Hebrew, here's how. I was like,
Oh, wow.
picture like cartoon with the little white surrender flag, right?
You're like, fine. Fine.
Okay, I'll do it.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I have to say that moment of surrender is the definitive moment where that step led to the next step, which led to the next step, which led to this opportunity, which led to teaching my own institute class, which led to leading tours, which led to studying Mary Magdalene. And so it really was that moment, but it's been a very interesting path. I never know the next step. I just try and enjoy the step I'm on, but it is a leap of faith. And so from that, I now lead tours all over the world. I love esoteric truth. I love particularly the divine feminine. That's really my jam. And Mary Magdalene's my person, because she is the prototype. She's the one that points me to Heavenly Mother. And so understanding Hebrew has taught me who she is in the Old Testament. Understanding Greek teaches me who she is in the New Testament. Understanding ancient Egypt shows me her archetype. Understanding where she shows up and the time and place she shows up in helps me understand her life, and then the remnants of her life that show up in France and Italy and Portugal and Spain and England. These help me show that followers of the way tried to preserve her story and this beautiful knowledge about her. And so all of those things have actually led to this point. They're all part of this amazing, amazing journey that I get to take.
Wow.
That is so beautiful. I feel like I'm getting the image in my mind of like a mosaic, like just different pieces of glass that all just fit together and create this life of yours.
I also was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult not that long ago, a few months ago, I think. And same, like it opened up like, oh, this is my whole life. Like, I get it now. I get why, as a kid.
Why can't I just accomplish a goal? My friends actually just set goals and do them.
I actually found you. I had read a couple books about Mary Magdalene, and I was instantly obsessed. Like I just had never really delved into who she was. And then I read a couple books, and then a friend of mine told me to listen to a podcast that you were interviewed on. And I was like, oh my gosh, this lady, like, it was amazing. And so then I looked up your website and I was like, oh my heck, she does tours, which I was just in Italy and I so wish you were with me because it was a cruise. And so it was short, in Italy.
Yeah.
And then we did Greece and Turkey, but there were so many things I wish I had known the context of, and there were so many Black Madonnas that were so cool that I know you were looking for in France right before I went there. You were in France doing that. And so it was magical, but probably would have been even more magical had you been there to tell me what everything meant. But you do tours, so you have a website and people can pay for your podcast. Is that right? And classes. Tell us a little bit about it.
I'm a strange potpourri of things I love because I end up spending my whole day doing this. So I was like, oh, I guess I need to turn this into some type of a career, which I haven't really managed to do. But the podcast is free. So the podcast is my gift to the world. And I actually am in the middle of recording what I call a summer series, all about Mary Magdalene, which is where that podcast I did with Mike Day was just really the most random, like, Mandy, I want to ask you about this. And it ended up being such an amazing podcast. But the summer series, I want to take each of these little pieces and go in a little bit more into depth about why these things happened or what the evidence is for it. So that's free. And then I have courses online about different subjects. And then like the big ticket, of course, is to come on tour and hang out and go see some of these places with me. So yeah, that's kind of like what I do. I'm starting to write a little more too. I just submitted a couple of articles, and I'll let you know if those get published, because again, I'm trying to give you the beautiful thing about Mary is she's to be shared. Beauty is to be shared. And so my goal as what I do is to give you the tools to access some of this stuff yourself and to use that along with the Spirit to come to your own conclusions, right? I mean, I work so hard and I study so hard, and I have spent a lot of money going to these places, but in the end, I'm one witness, and the other important witness is yourself, and the most important witness is, the Spirit. So I hope to be part of that alchemy, but really, I want it to be your journey. I want you to find her, right? And have that connection in a personal way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is really naive of me, but I've read a couple books about her and about the Gospel of Mary, but I have not been able to find the actual Gospel of Mary. Does it only exist in different languages? Is it not translated to English?
Coptic. It is translated. Let me, it's one of the Nag Hammadi writings. And do you want me to show you a couple copies really fast?
Please.
That'd be amazing.
Actually found something recently that was close to it, but I'm not sure. But I just wasn't sure about it. I wasn't sure if it was authentic or if it really was the Gospel of Mary. Anyway.
Yeah. So the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is usually put with these Nag Hammadi writings that were dug up around the same time as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what they have of her gospel, though, is just a few remnants. It's very damaged. The most important part of it is missing. Huge shocker. Not really, right? Someone's trying to take her down. But if you want just like one of just her, Jean Leloup has this particular one that has like the actual words. There's the Coptic.
Oh, wow.
I need that.
Yeah,
Same.
I recommend it.
Yeah,
but this one's great because if you're going to study Mary Magdalene, you've got to read the Gospel of Thomas and you've got to read the Gospel of Philip. And those are also in this particular volume.
Yes, I wondered about those too.
Yes.
So can you, I didn't put this in your questions, but I'm just needing more info now. So just going back, it kind of was just patriarchy or just the men in power at that time that took those out of the Bible or just didn't put them in the Bible? Like, just give us a little bit of, do you know the history of that?
The history is, the Nag Hammadi texts were found in the wall of a church. When they were tearing apart the church, they found these texts, and those texts have been put there to protect them. Now, a lot of these texts are considered quote unquote Gnostic. Gnostic is the Greek word. Gnosis means knowledge. But they weren't really considered part of the canon for whatever reason. And this has a lot to do with the church fathers and protocol and the Council of Nicaea. But this would be, again, this esoteric means hidden or veiled would probably be the best way to do it. Like the most sacred things are veiled. And so these are texts that are more hidden or have hidden truths in them. Perhaps they aren't for everybody. They're more for someone who's an initiate or part of this tradition. And in around, 500, 600, they started to get rid of all of these heretical texts, quote unquote. And so these were preserved to keep them from being destroyed. And I'm so glad, because there's some real interesting things. Now, whether you want to take it at face value or not, you've got to at least look critically at this text and say, why would someone write this? Why would they hide it? What's the motivation? And as we can tell from the second, I mean, it's just so tragic. From the second Mary bears her witness of the resurrected Lord, it's immediately, there are forces at work immediately trying to dismantle it and trying to allocate it in different ways other than this feminine testimony. And that force and the people who do that, whether intentionally or not, just snowballs throughout history until we get to 1969. So most of the history of the world, as far as like from her advent till very recently, no one examined that. And so, yeah, patriarchy for sure at play, sexism, power dynamics, right? The usual, right? The God of this world, money, power.
Yeah. Wow. It seems to me too, like after reading what I have read about her, that she was such a close companion of Christ, that she should have been held up. This is just my opinion, but I feel like she should be held up as an apostle. And when I look at her, the gospel that I have read from her, as you mentioned, which is sparse, but it's so powerful, and it's so, I just love that it seems very much inward spirituality, whereas when you look at the church that was set up after Christ's death was very rigid and very rule following and ritualistic. But with her, and I feel this way about Christ too, with the way that he taught, it was more about what's happening inward and less about the outward expression. And I love that. It makes me feel like she was so close to Christ, because it seems like, and again, this is just my opinion, but it seems like that was the way that he taught, was a very inward, reflective, pure, and what's the word I'm looking for? Like unique to us, to each of us. Like you were saying, like we need to find her. I love that you said that. And you have so much passion around this. And I love that you're so passionate that you want to share it with others and have them experience that love within themselves.
Thank you. Yes, she's very close to the Lord. In fact, I will go on record saying, I dare say there are none closer.
Wow.
Which should make our study of her an imperative, like just a hardcore imperative. And if you think about it, she's barely mentioned. And maybe it's just like a little cursory, oh, I guess it's Easter. We'll talk about, Mary Magdalene today, and just say, I mean, isn't it just amazing that her witness is so easily sidelined?
Yes. It's so disappointing in a lot of ways.
Oh.
But it is amazing that we have this information, and I agree, it should make us crave more.
Well, and to your point, she's called the apostle to the apostles. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, her title is the apostle to the apostles. And what's significant about that is the Eastern tradition is always reading from the Greek, which is where we get some of these misconceptions about her. And they never get this story about her being a prostitute. They never get this story about her being this penitent sinner. But apostoleo is the Greek word for to send forth, one who is sent forth. The Great Commission is, I send you forth. So when Christ, after their embrace in the garden, he said, go and tell my brothers and your brothers that I have risen. And that's her Great Commission. That's the first commission of the resurrected Lord. So that's where she gets that title. She is the one sent to tell those who are already sent, the apostle to the apostles. And just in 2016, the Catholic Pope changed his wording on her feast day to echo that beautiful language, the apostle to the apostles.
Oh, that is beautiful. I did not know that. See, this is what I'm so excited to learn.
Share some of the research that you've done, and also where you got some of the evidences, and what those evidences are, and the writings that you've used, and what those writings are that have shaped your understanding of Mary.
All right. Well, I think maybe the first place to start is these misconceptions about her. So,
yes,
we
please.
often see her as this, disrobed, penitent prostitute, in this moment of weakness. And really, you can trace much of that back to Pope Gregory. In 591 CE, he gave a sermon or a homily, and he does a few things here that are catastrophically bad for Mary the Magdalene's reputation. First of all, he's going to say she's the sinful woman in Luke 7. There's absolutely no evidence that this is the same person, but he's just going to go ahead and call it. He's going to conflate Mary the Magdalene with all the Marys in Scripture, right? So think of maybe Jenny or Jennifer's a name that's very common, right? Think of if I took all the Jennifers in your life and told one story, and I said, this is Jenny's story. Well, that's another thing that he does. And then he's going to say, well, this is Mary Magdalene. So let me quote him. So we do all of his horrible, gosh, I need to just calm down, but I really have some issues here. But this is what he
let
says,
it out.
quote,
Yes, we want all of it.
September 14th, 591 CE. Pope Gregory is also one of the ones that's a real advocate of celibacy being a requirement for the priesthood. Quote, she whom Luke calls the sinful woman. Okay, pay attention here to all the Gospels he's going to reference and just mash it all together. Whom Luke calls a sinful woman, that's Luke 7. Whom John calls Mary, doesn't say which Mary, because there's more than one. We believe to be the Mary from whom 7 devils were ejected, according to Mark. And what did these 7 devils signify, if not all the vices? It is clear, brothers, that the woman previously used the unguent to perfume her flesh in forbidden acts. That's it.
Now I know why you're so mad. It's like,
yeah,
it's like horrible. I mean, one of the worst things you could say about anyone, but why would you say that about a follower of Christ of any type? That's feels very sexist, feels very much trying to make women in general a bad thing or a sinful thing. Why?
Yeah. Well, in the early church fathers, there's kind of this idea of, woman will be your undoing, right? Like that your sexuality is a bad thing, and that women, a woman you're attracted to, or if you engage, is going to keep you from being holy. And really, that is like the age-old story of our world. Eve, in this moment of understanding progression, chooses to eat the fruit. And from there, it's just been downhill. Let's be honest. As far as the perception of understanding the role of the divine feminine, and really, there's so many problems here. As you can see, he quotes 3 Gospels. He's using all these stories. He's attributing them to Mary. And then he's saying, which vices is it? And honestly, Pope Gregory is reading from the Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, done the translation by St. Jerome. And in the Latin Vulgate, the word used is peccatrix, which means a sinful woman in Luke 7. But if you were saying a prostitute, actually, it would be meretrix. It would be a totally different word. And that's not even contained in the Latin translation that he's reading from. So in his own horrible version of Mad Libs, he just really undoes this woman's reputation with this. And it's perpetuated for the next 1,500 years.
It's so disappointing that he said these things. It's almost more disappointing that people just took it and ran with it. You'd wish people would be like, "Oh, let's look into this. Let's look into this history," or that doesn't sound right. But it sounds like he was maybe saying things that a lot of people wanted to hear, which is breaks my heart. I know it was a different time, but the sad thing is I think a lot of people still view Mary in this way, and
Absolutely.
it's just so unfair and just a disservice to them. I hope people can hear this. I hope you can spread knowledge to clear her name on these things,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I definitely connect with her more than I've connected with any figure in the scriptures in general, besides Jesus. And so it's so unfortunate, it's so unfortunate that had to happen, and that she's not, that we don't know more about her. But I'm so glad you're bringing light to it. And I think it's becoming more well known now, which is fabulous.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so. I think when real light hits the world, like true, pure light, it's like the movie Thor. Remember when Thor came and there's that huge like pit in the ground, and then Thor runs off and everybody comes to the pit? That's what we're doing. Like, we're standing around the pit, like real light hit here, real illumination, real divinity hit here. And we're trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what that was. But we're not the only ones around the pit. There are several adversarial forces, entropic forces. The second light hits, the armies are mobilized and they're there trying to scramble the whole message. And it's so in a reverse way, it totally sucks. Mm-hmm. But in the reverse way, when you see a lot of opposition at work, when you see this crazy, huge smear campaign of ginormous proportions, then you have to say, what's at work here? Obviously, there's a lot of light at work here. Otherwise, why bother? Mm-hmm. And so when you see that, let that be like a little light on your path saying, there's a lot of work going on here. Obviously, there's something, and that's actually when some of these texts from the Nag Hammadi writings were. I think this is when they started to put those away and say, we've got to preserve this. And to think that we live in a day and age where, like, I have these ancient writings in volumes at my instant access, it blows my mind. And why would they come to light today? Like, all of this stuff is coming to light today. And as people look at these different sources, like I recommend the Gospel of Mary, the Nag Hammadi writings, this other book, this is just one I just treasure, the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. It's said to be passed down through a community in France.
Oh, wow.
I have to say, this is extraordinary. And again, what is at work here? And as Latter-day Saints, or are we talking LDS or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Here's the amazing thing to me. As Latter-day Saints, like, you could say, if you were to categorize the Book of Mormon as a book, I think all of our Christian brothers and sisters would categorize the Book of Mormon as apocryphal, meaning it's hidden, it's been unveiled. It was dug out of the ground, it had been put down and then resurfaced. And like, this is our mojo. But when you pull out any of these other works, people are like, well, where did you get that from? Well, what is that? And I'm like, this is our jam. Like, of any body of saints in the world, we should be open to and at least looking at some of these texts. Wow. And then someone's going to quote D&C 93, and I just have to say, I think it's 91, about apocryphal works. And the Lord's instruction there was, you don't need to translate it. But if you read it with the Spirit, there are many beautiful truths in there you can learn from. But the only thing he said not to do was, it's not necessary that you translate it. But of course, we don't read carefully, and we just say, well, he said it's bad. I read once 8 years ago.
Oh, that is, I love that you said that because that is so true. And it's, like you mentioned, of all people, of all religions, we should be open to
Yes.
this.
Oh my gosh.
And, something I do with my own spirituality is, sometimes I think about Mormonism, for instance, and I think, and just the way I live my religion, I think if I got to the end and it wasn't true, what harm came from it?
Yeah.
Like I'm living a life, I'm trying to, not, I make mistakes, but I'm trying to live a life of love. And I think about Mary Magdalene and why are people so against it? Like you mentioned, it's very telling. And it makes me think like, what harm is in this? This is just empowering women,
Yeah.
and I believe in it. That's me believing in it. But I'm saying, even if you were like, I'm a little unsure of this, like what harm comes from it? This is precious writings of someone that was close to Christ. It's amazing to me that people are not jumping all over this. And I wanted to mention one more thing when you were saying that I think you said it came about around 1969. And that really hit me because that was such a time of feminine movement. That was one of the biggest. I mean, they were trying to push for equal rights of women, with
Yeah.
the ERA. And I just thought, of course, like, and I think we're in a similar time to the women of the 70s where we just want to be heard. We want to be seen within every form, but especially in spirituality. There's such a huge push right now for more information on Heavenly Mother and Mary Magdalene, and I am loving it. And I feel like it's such a bonding time for women because we're all just craving this knowledge. And yeah, I mean, this is why we're so excited to have you on, because I'm like been waiting for this, and I'm like, oh, I just want to soak it all up because it lights me up. And you mentioned that you feel the same. It does. It sparks something in us. I love the Thor reference so much. It's like Thor in my chest.
Yes. And I think it's so validating to women. Like it validates women. It helps women to feel like connected and to something greater than what we're presented, just and something greater than us, because we're not given that in the base level of the gospel as much as men are.
Well, there is a deep, and I mean a deep hunger in all of us that I feel like I've been starving my whole life. I mean, I recall moments where I just was like, there's this deafening silence about the role of women, and yet our theology is unequaled. We have this unprecedented theology of a heavenly father and a heavenly mother, and that they work alongside each other in bringing to pass the immortality and eternal life of humankind. And yet we've got radio silence, right? And then the male salvific path. Now, please know, this is such an important part to anything I teach. The divine feminine will never, ever disparage the divine masculine. Everything Mary Magdalene is about is Jesus Christ. She is all about him. And as we look a little deeper, hopefully, you will see he's always pointing back to her as well. And so it's this beautiful interdependence, it's this beautiful commitment to raising all the children of God, both male and female. So let me say in my comments about patriarchy or the history of the world, I am in no way wanting to disparage divine masculinity, righteous masculinity, like beautiful, kind, generous, powerful masculinity that our Father in heaven and Jesus Christ exhibit. And so in saying that, he points us to her, but notice she knows she's going to take the hits. I believe she knows everything's going to happen. But the most important part is that her witness of his resurrection is intact. And maybe in this world, she's not going to be seen correctly by many. But the most important part for her is that Jesus is seen. And I think that tells us so much about her. But I also believe that historically, we just have never looked at these texts because most scriptural interpretation was always done by men and they didn't care. They weren't worried about Mary Magdalene. Here's a little rabbit hole that happened to me this morning. I was reading some C.S. Lewis quotes, and I noticed he was a fellow of Magdalen College in Oxford. Now, this is a huge thread. This is like, if you came to England with me, the tradition of Mary Magdalene comes up through England this way. And so they both have a Magdalen College, Oxford and Cambridge. What's so interesting is that in England, they say Magdalen College. They don't say Magdalen, they say Magdalen College. Well, I was like, the word Magdalen means like overly sentimental. It actually means like so drunk, you're overly sentimental. So I looked it up just like 20 minutes before this podcast. And it's like, this came from the Middle Ages when Mary Magdalene saw the resurrected Lord and was overly sentimental in seeing him. And this is where we get this word Magdalene.
Oh my gosh, I
Isn't that
love
crazy?
it.
Like,
That is
here's
amazing.
this linguistic garbage that came out of the Middle Ages from assumptions made about Mary in seeing the resurrected Lord. So,
wow, interesting. That's so
yeah,
interesting.
That's fascinating. I feel like I'm that way. I mean, I cry easily. Overly sentimental.
Yeah.
But I also think sometimes as women we try not to cry, and I'm over that because I've realized like I can feel things deeply, and I've been ashamed to cry in front of people, and now I'm like, no, it's a good thing. You know what I mean? I think as women we can, and this of course is a, you know, not to blanket statement all women because men are emotional as well. Yeah. And I think men should cry more. They need it. But I do think that we need to let it out more. And it's actually, it's kind of a superpower, I think, to feel things deeply. I was crying a minute ago, and like my typical self, I was hiding behind my mic. But when you said the word starving, it just hit me in my chest. Like, we have been starving for these things. I have a very I have some issues with the LDS religion. I am a member, but I have some things, and sexism was not one of them for a long time. I honestly was kind of like, what are we worried about here? And but over the last few years, as I've followed different people and learned different things, that word that you said is so, I feel like that's so poignant. Starving. There are so many women that are starving for this information, and kind of like what Emmy mentioned, men already have it. They've had it from the start. So they don't know what it's like to starve.
They don't. They don't. And the best men recognize that. And so many men are like, I don't see what the big deal is. I'm like, well, you have this perfectly laid out salvific path. It's like, do this, do this, do this. And we're banging two rocks together like cave women over here trying to create some type of spark because of that huge gap between our theology and what it actually plays out and what it actually looks like. And like that pit in your stomach of hunger, profound hunger, is just something I've lived with and tried to talk away. And I applaud you for not hiding your emotions. I'm done with it too. Like I tried to never cry because of my family. It was like a sign of weakness. And now I have a beautiful daughter who's very emotional, and she's just like a goddess of fire and light, and she cries a lot. And she taught me the beauty of expression, and she taught me that. And now I never apologize for expressing an emotion. And yet, if you go to a testimony meeting, what are you going to hear if a woman starts to feel a strong emotion? This apology, right? So how about the three of us at least? We are not going to apologize for expressing something that really resonates deeply, deeply within us and is precious and valuable. And to those of us starving, these little morsels, can you even say how delicious and satisfying these few little things are? This is manna. This is the one thing that sustains my faith life. Is really, Mary is the person who sustains my faith life and shows me a better way and shows me that all of these clues exist in the text if we're willing to excavate the text, if we're willing to like roll up our sleeves and get into this and get down and look at some of these things, canonized or not canonized, to find ways to fill the thirst, like quench the thirst, feed the hunger. The Lord talks so much about feeding the hungry and releasing the captives and healing. And I always think of that so literally, like an idiot. But as I'm talking to you, the Spirit was like, what do you think you're doing right now, Mandy? Like, thank heavens. If I can feed you food and break that chain, my day is blessed. My day is blessed. And it's not me. It's this amazing woman that we're talking about, who breaks chains, who feeds the hungry, who liberates the captives, who's going to heal this wound we've felt for however long. I mean, for me, it's been my whole life, but she really is the balm to this wound if we will examine her life and look at the few things we have left.
Mic drop.
I've heard you talk about
wow. That's church.
No, seriously. This is why we do this. It heals us.
Oh my gosh, it does.
Like, we'll have all these amazing people on just to heal us.
It's very selfish.
And if other
heal
people listen,
heal other people, right? Like,
Amen.
Isn't that the whole thing?
Seriously.
Amen. Wow.
I've heard you talk about the name Mary Magdalene and how people thought it was the city Magdala, right?
Yeah.
But you think otherwise.
Yes. Let's jump into this. So, do you know it was not until the very latest publication of the SBL Bible that every single Bible says Magdala. I want to say it like the guy in Groundhog's Day. Punxsutawney, this tiny little town. And that's how I feel like I want to say Magdala, this little fishing town. And because that's how I feel about it. I gotta
go watch that.
Oh my gosh. There isn't a town by the name of Magdala until about 500 AD. Before that time, the town is a very Romanized town. It's named Tarichaea. It does exist on the shores of Galilee. Today it's called Magdala. And I do recommend, I always take my tour groups there. There's a beautiful church built to the women who supported Christ in his ministry. However, to say that it's from the first century isn't true. It was Tarichaea. And so that's just garbage. Now, here's where my little Hebrew story comes into play. Migdala is the Hebrew equivalent, and it means the tower. So I always now call her Mary the Magdalene, or because Magdalene is just a Greek transliteration of Migdala. Well, Migdala means the tower, and it's a feminine noun. And if you break it apart even more, the beginning of the word, the M, is the Hebrew preposition with. Gadal is the word for great, mighty, large, impressive. And then the is the feminine ending. So with great strength, with greatness, with power. That is what Migdala broken down to in its elements means. And so she's known as Mary the Magdala. And it's stunning to me that even in the Greek, and I have not found anyone else who has written about this, so maybe I shouldn't share it with you because someone's going to steal it and write a paper. So I don't know. You guys decide if you want to keep it in. But I would love to write this paper because, again, scholars have been reading this Greek Bible. This is the latest Bible in Luke 8 that says Mary the Magdalene actually has the footnote for the very first time in the history of the world. Magdalene may refer to a nickname meaning tower, or to an unknown town called Magdala. Okay, is that a oxymoron? An unknown town called Magdala?
Yeah. What?
Let's just keep going. On the western shore of Lake Gennesaret. But this is the very first, I just bought this a few months ago, the very first Bible to say it's a nickname. Now, why is that important? Well, Peter gets this beautiful nickname of the rock, right? On you I will build my church.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we have Mary the Tower, Mary the Magdala, all of a sudden, whoa, we just transposed her position right there, didn't we? Because
Tower's bigger than a rock.
she's right there. We've got the rock and we've got the tower.
It. And the great.
The great.
And the great.
The great.
Yes.
That is
And let me read to
powerful.
you, if it's all right, can I read to you? This is my favorite part of this book. This is where I believe, and I can't prove it, none of this, like I try to back up as much as I can, but like I said, this scholarship is actually so new with her because most men have never examined her life much at all. It's those of us who are just chomping at the bit here.
Yeah.
But when she anoints Jesus prior to his crucifixion, which is like, boy, if you want to push pause on probably one of the most intimate, godly moments in the history of the world, it's that moment. We just read over it, but may I invite all of you listening, talking, whatever, just stop and try and take it in with all of your senses. I mean, she's got this nard, this oil that has this really, really profound smell. It's this act of devotion. She anoints his head and his feet. It's in the middle of this chaos. It's this very tender, intimate moment. And it's almost like, I almost can see like time stopping or at least slowing down until these idiots break it and, complain about her doing it. But it's just like the fragrance fills the room. And maybe it's just this profoundly holy moment that sometimes people can't sit with or sit in. If you ever notice that. Mm-hmm. And they start grumbling. This is in the Gospel of the Beloved Companion, page 59. Seeing what she had done, the disciples therefore grumbled against her and amongst themselves. But hearing this, Yeshua said to them, "Leave her be." In the Greek, there's an exclamation mark by that in the Gospel of John. She has anointed me for what I am come to do and done what she is appointed to do. Only from the truth I tell you, whenever they speak of me, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. You do not know or understand what she has done, but I tell you this, when all have abandoned me, only she shall stand beside me like a tower built on a high hill and fortified, cannot fall, nor can it be hidden. From this day forth, she shall be known as Magdala, for she shall be as a tower to my flock. And the time will soon come when her tower shall stand alone by mine.
I have chills all over.
I know. I hate to speak after any of this.
So
it's just like
it's okay after my whole tirade, but do you see the beauty? Do you see the beauty of that title? Do you see how extraordinary it is that she has it but be? Do you think the Lord ever does anything just by happenstance or just, no, the tower is a very intentional nickname. It's a very intentional reference. And in the Greek, it's always Mary, hey, Magdalene, Mary the Magdalene. And in all of our English, we never get that. So that's what I'm going to write a paper on, that no one even puts the in there. And so we've never even known to ask the question, why is it Mary the Magdalene? But it's right there in the Greek every time. Mary the Magdalene, Mary the Tower.
You have got to write that paper stat. Go now.
I know. I need to get on it. I need to get on it.
That is
Nobody take
amazing. Nobody steal it. It's copyright, right, Nemi? I don't know.
Copyright. That's true. By being on the podcast, I've already copyrighted the idea.
Yep.
I love it. Oh, the fact of that. I mean, when we first talked about the tower, I thought of like strength and just something powerful, big. But what I love in that is that you said she'll watch over his flock. I mean, that is like the most comforting thing. That's what brought tears to my eyes, is just like knowing that someone is watching over you, which I think is how a lot of us view Christ. But it just confirms their bond, that he trusts her to watch over us as well. How incredible is this?
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
freaking out.
And by his
go
side.
read Micah.
Yeah.
Go read, I believe it's Micah. Let's look it up. Micah 4, where he talks about, and you, Migdal Eder, you, the tower of the flock, like how the daughter of Jerusalem has been afflicted and persecuted, but she is the tower of the flock, and she is the one who goes on to give this beautiful testimony of Jesus Christ. In fact, I think our tradition, for example, of dyeing Easter eggs in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, there's a story that she went before the emperor and told him this beautiful story of Christ's resurrection. And he said, that happening has as much chance, and I'm paraphrasing, we don't have the exact story, but he said, there's as much chance of that happening as the egg in your hand turning red, at which point the egg in her hand turns red. And if you look at icons, Eastern Orthodox icons of Mary Magdalene, she's holding a red egg. Yes.
Gosh,
she's holding the alabaster jar, that jar of ointment that we just read about. That's how you can identify her or distinguish her from the mother. She's often depicted wearing red or green. Another beautiful, interesting clue in the art, which I love, that's another book I need to write about how the art preserves the tradition, is she's often seen wearing the exact opposite of Jesus Christ. So if he has on a red tunic and a green cloak, she'll have on a green tunic and a red cloak. And again, that's that perfect balance of masculine, feminine, equal opposite. In Adam and Eve in Genesis, it says the word for helpmeet is not a great translation. It's ezer kenegdo, like a help that is the equal opposite. Like everything you're not is in this perfect complementary piece.
Wow.
And Ezer it means help. But did you know the only other times Ezer is used is with Eve and Jesus? So Eve is in a type of Jesus. And then we have the tower or the Magdalene, who in art and in all of these moments, notice how she's this perfect, complementary, equal opposite. And she is frickin' brave and strong and beautiful and courageous. To be found at that tomb resurrection morning alone, Gospel of John gives us this very beautiful clue. While it was yet dark, she's a woman in Palestine during a very scary time when he's gone. Peter's gone, right? He denies the Lord. It's too much. He's left. Many of the apostles are either in seclusion or they've left completely. And there's the women. There are those gutsy, amazing women at the foot of the cross, at the tomb, in all of the ugly, harsh, scary places. You will find the women. and John, and possibly Nicodemus. And so that should tell you, again, like, we have to take these little clues we get about her and really start to ask questions and really start to say, wow, would I be up at 3 or 4 in the morning by a tomb of a condemned man who they killed, like standing there come hell or high water? And hell or high water comes, and let me tell you what, she is unflinching. She is not budged, which should tell you something about her courage and also about knowing who she is. I mean, I always say I picture her like Arwen when the 9 Nazgul are coming to get Frodo across the water, and she like goes up on her horse with her sword. She's like, come and claim him, like, come at me. And and then they're taken out. This is the kind of woman we're talking about. She's not a cream puff. She's not a penitent prostitute by any means. This is a woman of power, of ability, of courage. And if to be a disciple of Christ is marked by devotion to the Lord, nobody touches her.
Wow. I've never thought about that. The fact that she had to travel in the night, and women could be put to death so much easier than men could. It's interesting that the men, I don't want to say they were afraid, but it seems like, I mean, I would be afraid if I just watched Christ, you know, be murdered. But it means even more because she was a woman, because they could have, you know, women were put to death for such simple things back then. That is like, I've never thought about that.
And not just put to death, crazy. Right? Considerable harm. They're soldiers, and she's fearless.
Yeah.
Right. Before Taylor Swift, Mary the Magdalene was fearless. So there you have it.
The real fearless one. I love the references.
The only other one. So just to kind of spell it out, do you think she was married to Jesus on this earth? Or who do you think she was to him?
My personal opinion on this is that she was. This would go way before, well, theologically, if we look at our doctrine, which is that a person can only obtain the highest level of the celestial kingdom by being sealed in marriage. For Christ or heavenly parents to arrive at that level, then one would have to be sealed to a dyadic companion, right? You would have to have both components. And so, again, here's our theology, just like over here, just going, we believe in this. And then here's our practices, which are like, well, I don't know about that, right? And yet we're staring DNC 132 in the face. So yes, I believe she is the perfect, and I mean perfect. And perfect in Greek means complete, whole, fashioned. She is the perfect complement to the Lord. So she's just as evolved. She's just as complete. She's just as full of godly attributes as the Savior is, in the perfect complementary opposite way. And this is perhaps why we need to start cheering on the ways that womanhood shows up in our world as maybe a more esoteric thing. If you think about the voice of the Spirit, for example, which in Hebrew is a feminine noun, it's a very internal thing. When the Spirit speaks to me, I often find it very difficult to put language to the light and knowledge that is communicated through the Spirit to me. And I believe that's a very feminine thing. It's called wisdom. So we have knowledge, which is masculine. It's very spoken, right? In the beginning, Elohim, which is a Hebrew plural too, by the way. Let's just totally make that thing clear and say,
Oh,
let's fix that. Oh, you ladies didn't know that?
no.
I
Oh,
did,
gosh.
and it makes me
Did
so
you?
happy. Yes, I've learned this in the last
Elohim
few
is
years,
a
and I'm like,
Hebrew plural.
love
Yeah. Think of
Shut
the
up.
connotations for that. Again,
it.
right?
Mhm. We
There's
always
deity,
just
there's
give it to the men,
Elohim.
though.
Yep.
Why?
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Elohim speaking and creation, but I believe our mother, I believe wisdom is often transmitted sometimes in the silence. And so not only are we not excavating, we're not looking at these things, we're not validating a different way of coming at truth through this more intrinsic, maybe more intuitive way. But how much time does our world lay out to be quiet, to be still and know that I am God, Elohim, to listen to the silence, to be okay just with it and be communicated and supported and nourished by silence? I mean, that is one thing that patriarchy has really, really screwed with in our world, is this like constancy of motion and constant achievement and constant rising up and smashing your neighbor down. And I think wisdom is such a radically different thing. And she's been crowded out in every possible way. But wisdom, nonetheless, to me, I would define wisdom as the voice that speaks into the silence, in the silence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge key to understanding Mary and our mother better.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm sorry if this wasn't you, but I remember hearing something about a red thread. Thank you for joining us today for this beautiful conversation with Mandy Green. If you love this episode and want to hear even more about Mary Magdalene, don't forget that part 2 is available as a locked episode. You can access it through Spotify or Apple Podcasts for only $2.99 a month or $24.99 a year. And you'll be able to go back and listen to any of our locked episodes that you missed. Your support truly means the world to us, and we're thrilled to bring you these exclusive conversations. Next up, we are so excited to share with you a truly unique episode featuring Ankar Ajmani and Bryn Lewis. They have an interfaith marriage, which is quite special and different from what we'd often see here in Utah. While many interfaith marriages in the area result from one partner leaving the religion of origin, Ankar and Bryn's story began interfaith before they got married. Ankar offers deep insights into Hinduism and Sikhism, and together they share how they fully embrace and support each other's religious beliefs. Their wedding took place in both the Krishna temple, the one that we discussed in our episodes 3, 4, and 5, and an LDS church, with a very supportive LDS bishop guiding them through the process. It was a fascinating and inspiring conversation, and we can't wait for you to hear it. Ankar and Bryn will also be speaking at our upcoming That's Church experience on November 2nd in Provo, Utah at the Compass Gallery. So this is a great way to get to know them before the event. We'll be sharing more details about registration soon, so be sure to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for all the updates. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.